structure the session in about 20 minutes for the presentation, and then another 20 minutes for discussion, so please be free to ask questions and comments afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm very pleased to be here. I was really very interested this morning by the presentation of the HEIDA project because there are many common points, and the starting point, for instance, was really the same, this interrogation, what is quality in internationalization? And so I have a longish introduction to present the two institutions that I represent today and, that, and the context of this CeQuInt label that started off as a European project, exactly the same. So the European Consortium of Accreditation is an association of those quality assurance and accreditation agencies that wish to participate. It is informal, it's like a platform for exchanges between agencies, as we have all the same problems, the same issues, and it's very good to exchange. And it is all kinds of agencies, like my French agency is just dealing with engineering degree programs at master's level, but there are all other kinds of evaluation and accreditation agencies that deal with all higher education programs. So the topics are broad and of general interest normally to all of us. And so it was founded in 2003, and my agency CTI is a member since 2005. And the main aim is exchange of good practice, mutualize. For example, when we have evaluation of joint programs, we can have joint evaluation procedures and agreements. We exchange experts. We have database that is shared. And the idea is to make it easier because there are more and more joint and double degrees, and to recognize accreditations from one country to another. And there is an interesting database. If you are looking up for a program and you ask yourself, is it accredited by the national authority in a country? So all the member agencies of ICA, we have a joint database that is called Crossroads, and where all of us have a link to this database of the accredited programs. And so, of course, the agency must be a member of ICAR, but it can be a useful tool to check the quality assurance of a particular program or institution. I'm a full-time staff member of the French accreditation body for engineering education, Commission des Titres d'Ingénieurs. In France, there are no professional organizations. The engineering profession is not regulated, but the degree is regulated. And in order to be able to award an engineering degree, you have to be accredited by CTI. So it is a kind of the guardian of the quality of the teaching and learning and outcomes of the engineering profession. It is very old. It is one of the oldest quality assurance agencies in the world, I would say. I think there's one British one that is still older. It was founded in the 30s because there was this, people were asking, there were many new engineering programs coming up, and there was really the issue of quality. How to make sure that new programs are up to the expectancies. And in the 90s, CTI started to evaluate periodically every engineering program, which it still does today. We also award, we can do a joint procedure and award a quality label for engineering that maybe some of you know. It's the EURACE label, which is also, it's a European association that set up the standards and guidelines, and the EURACE label may be awarded at bachelor and master level if all the quality assurance is okay with the standards and guidelines. So I come back to our European Consortium of Accreditation. So we have working groups and share experiences. And exactly as for the HEIDA project, we asked ourselves, what is quality in internationalization? How to check quality. And the concept, the definition of internationalization, we took exactly the same definition as the HEIDA project, which is the Jane Knight definition. And we started with a European funded project from 2012 to 2015. It was coordinated by the Dutch-Flemish agency NVAO, because in those days ICA had no legal existence, which it now has. It was 14 agencies from 10 countries participated to the project, and associated partner organizations, and the objective was to identify the indicators. So you are about data of indicators, and we asked ourselves which indicators would be significant for identifying quality in internationalization. And we considered two levels, the institutional level and the program level. And we defined standards and guidelines which are slightly different if it's a program or an institution. And then we said we will identify good practice and disseminate good practice. And from the start, there was the question, should we, at the end of the European project, create a certificate and promote it and award it to those who wish to apply. So that was the starting point of our project. So the name, you see the first line, Certificate for Quality in Internationalization, shortcut CeQuInt. So there were 15 pilot procedures. Each agency proposed an institution or a program to be a pilot in different countries. And so we evaluated 10 programs, 4 institutions, and then during the project came up there is something in between, which is a department or a school. And the example was a Spanish university where there was one school who applied. So they are not at program level, but they are not at institutional level either. So it was interesting to see if our framework would apply, which one would more apply to a school or department. So it was for us a good test. In the end, we decided not to make a third framework, but to apply the framework of institutions also to departments or schools. And then the dissemination conference was in February 2015, so it's not so old, so it's not so far away. And then we decided to create the certificate. And today there are 15 members of ICAR that may award the certificate at 2 levels, program or institution. You may say, for example, my institution is not ready as a whole. We have no defined strategy, no tools, so we will not apply as a university. But we have one program that is totally internationalized, which may get the label. So it is up to the institution or the program director to decide on which level to apply. There are 3 key documents you will find on the website of ICA. I give the references at the end. So there's the framework, which describes the contents, what we expect, the guidelines. And there is a guide for the self-evaluation report, how to fill in the self-evaluation report. We ask to provide documents of proof for what you say as quality in your different items. And that is where the HEIDA project is very interesting, because the CeQuInt project says, okay, you say there is a lot of international exchanges between a network of 10 universities. Show proof. Why do you say it's good or high quality? And that's where the HEIDA data can be very interesting to have the indicators of this quality. But in our CeQuInt project, we leave it totally up to the institution or the program to provide whatever proof they wish. It is really more oriented on quality, and we leave the initiative to the applicant to provide the proof. And there is also a third document that can be interesting anyway. It is connected but not directly. It is a guide on specific learning outcomes of intercultural and international learning outcomes. It can be a very interesting document just to read and to take into account when you apply for the certificate or just for information. And then there was the question when the outcome of the European project was, okay, ICA will award a certificate. And we as an agency also, we said another certificate. It's like was said this morning, we heard that as institutions we get so many surveys and we have to fill in all these figures and it's not always the same figures and we have to start it all over again. And it's the same. We are quality checked by the National Agency for Research, by the Accreditation Agency for Engineering degree programs. Do we want another institution that comes and checks and provide proof, etc.? And so we as an agency had also to decide whether we go for the certificate or not. So the reasons why we decided to participate were because in France, in our case, in French engineering education, internationalization is a must to be accredited. But until now, very often for our experts, it is very restrictive. Internationalization is very often interpreted as student mobility, teaching staff mobility, and proficiency in English. And that's it. And we thought that was a little bit restrictive and that there were many other means and ways to internationalize an institution, a program. And so it was interesting to have this tool to think about this. What is internationalization? It was very interesting to set up a common methodology with all these European agencies to work together to find common items, and we agreed about the common framework. They are qualitative criteria, because also it was a necessity, because our agencies were so different. Some evaluate medicine, law, engineering, social sciences, humanities, so it was so different, it had to fit all types of institutions and programs. Private, big university, research universities, applied science, so it had to fit for everyone, so it is quite global. It was also a good idea to identify and value good practice, and it is our aim also to participate to the European construction, and it was a good means to have a common tool, a European tool. And for the institution, we said at the first level it's just an auto-evaluation tool. Just use the auto-evaluation guide and try to fill it in and think. I give you an example. In those days, I was still working in an engineering school. And the first question, the first criteria is there a general internationalization strategy in your institution? So I said, oh yes, sure, there is. So we are good. And then the second question is, do all your stakeholders know about this strategy? Are they aware of the strategy? And then I started to think, do our companies who offer internships, do all our students, does the whole network of stakeholders, are they aware? Do we really communicate efficiently on this strategy? So it is a very efficient way to ask the questions, the good questions about how you internationalize and how you manage internationalization. It is very objective feedback by international experts. The expert team that awards the certificate there must be one person on the team from the national system who knows the national constraints and regulations, and the others, there must be 2 members from other countries with another view and another input, and there must be 1 student. It is so always good to have other people look at what you are doing. And it is, of course, identify good practice. Sometimes people were surprised when the expert said, well, this is great, this is special, no one else does this, and people were sometimes surprised that they had this good practice, and they can promote it on the website of ICA. And it can be, because the label is not compulsory, and maybe one university is putting emphasis on sustainable development, other engineering schools, for example, in France, put an emphasis on the management of communication tools. There are different labels, so you can choose a label that fits your institution best and shows what is excellent at your specific institution. So we decided to participate to the certificate because it was, and an institution could just use it as a tool. It could share examples of good practice, even if you don't apply for the certificate. So you can go through the website of HEIDA, and if you are convinced that your program or university has a very good practice, you can just apply on the site, explain your practice. Then there is a certification group that reads the proposals and that can say, yes, we will publish it on our website as a good practice, without having to apply for the certificate. And then, of course, the third level would be to apply for the certificate. And this is probably the most interesting for you, the most interesting slide. So it is really the references, the criteria and standards that we took into account. So there are 5 standards at institutional level and 5 at program level, and each time 3 sub-criteria. And the first is intended internationalization. So that is, as I said before, where it starts. Do you have an internationalization goal? Did you define verifiable objectives to put it into practice? And do all your stakeholders know about it? And does it have a positive impact on education? It should not be something at the institutional level that the rector has this great idea about internationalization, but it doesn't have any influence on any program. So on the second level, did you put into place an action plan? And that is sometimes already difficult for my experience, that once you have a strategy, it's not so difficult to describe a strategy, but what measures have you taken to realize the strategy? And does it ensure the achievement of your goals? It must have, and that was something I heard of the HEIDA project this morning also, it must have all dimensions of an institution. It must include learning outcomes, teaching, learning. It must include staff and students. It must be overall reaching the whole life of the institution. And then the support part, the third criteria, support. Once the general management has defined an internationalization goal, is there the necessary means and staff and things put into place to realize the goal? Or is it just an idea? The third standard is about implementation and the information system. Do you have the technical means to collect and process relevant information? Do you really think it's important to have this information system in place for an effective management of your internationalization policy? And do you have documented outcomes and proof of results? And that is exactly what HEIDA is proposing. And the fourth standard is enhancement. So can you demonstrate that it has been implemented? Does it really enhance the quality of the education and of the research of the university? And are the stakeholders involved internally and externally in the enhancement of the internationalization? And the fifth standard is about governance. Are the responsibility clearly defined? Who does what at what level? Who is in charge of what at what level? The structure how is it structured, what is the leadership, at what level, and can you demonstrate the reaction to the input. So that is, all these items are at institutional level, and as you see, it must really be something that is reaching overall in the institution and going outside to the stakeholders, not something worked out in an office of a rector or a president. And then at program level, you see the first standard is the same. Do you have a strategy for your program of internationalization? And do you have goals and objectives? And does it have an impact on the general overall quality of your program? And then it's more focused on training on the programs. Did you define international and intercultural learning outcomes? How do you carry out the student assessment? Does it take into account these intended learning outcomes? And have you evaluated the graduate achievement? So there has to be an input of the alumni and of the achieved intended learning outcomes. And then teaching and learning is about the program contents, is the internationalization in the contents of the program. Are there some teaching methods that are encouraging internationalization? And what is the learning environment of the program? Is it international? Really international. The staff and the students, it's the same criteria. What is the composition of your staff? Is it only national, regional staff? Is your staff very international? If they are national, do they have an international experience? And we speak not only of the teaching staff, we speak also of the administrative staff. And do you provide services for students and for the staff members to improve intercultural or international competencies? And then the procedure, I mean, I can go maybe more quickly. So you can apply through any of the agencies that award the program within ICAR. You write an auto-evaluation report. There is a site visit by a panel of experts, the assessment report, and then the agency makes the decision. In some countries, the agencies are not allowed to make decisions. They can only give an advice. In that case, it is ICAR that takes the decision, and there is a check by the certification group that the rules, the procedures were respected. So it's the last check, it's not very complicated, and then on the website of ICAR we publish the results, and then the award is official. And what is also maybe interesting is the assessment scale. So for each of the 5 standards, the 3 criteria globally, at the end it's the standard that gets a mark. Unsatisfactory, satisfactory, good, or excellent. And excellent means that it is a good practice. What the expert felt was really exceptional and a good practice. And you cannot get the label if one standard is unsatisfactory, and you have to have 3 good or excellent to be able to get the certificate. And here are some examples of good practice. The first was maybe the one that, so I did not participate, of course, to all the pilots. I participated to one pilot, and I got the restitution. So I don't know so well the examples of good practice. This one was really impressive because it is a small economics management school in Germany that has no student mobility at all. So if you look at the criteria, student mobility is 0, but the whole program is totally international. They don't need to go anywhere because they are all international. There is, I think, no nationality had more than 2 students. There were 20 nationalities in the class, student and staff the same, administrative and teaching staff, everything was international. The curriculum was about European law, the curriculum content was international. And it was really a great example of how a program can be really, the institution, sorry, can be really totally international everywhere. And they had a goal, defined goal with objectives, and they had this check, which was very interesting, the catalog of measures, and then they carried out this control. They checked the last 3 years and the upcoming 3 years and look how they performed and how they will, what are the aims for the coming 3 years. It was really overall a very, very good example. And of course here in this case, as opposed to this, what we heard this morning, the location was a privilege because they are located at the frontier of 3 countries. So naturally, the program includes a visit to the European Parliament in Strasbourg, which is next door. So it was quite easy also to be international in this context, maybe. So, also the experts felt that it was a strong support by everyone at the high management level, professors, administrative staff, students, everyone was enthusiastic. There is an alumni association. They all work all over the world now, but they still meet regularly and come back to the institution to share their experiences. So a very good example. At program level, I have 2 examples at program level. One is a bachelor program in the Netherlands who have done a matrix of intercultural and international learning outcomes per course, saying that the course would be a teaching module. So they said this matrix helped them a lot to follow up the achievement of the learning outcomes. So it was a very practical way to measure the achievement of intended learning outcomes. And the last example is also very interesting. It's also a Dutch university of one program. They had some teaching staff, they had problems with conflict in a classroom. They had themselves a low experience of internationalization. So they set up a center and a platform for exchanges. So it can be, it is like, this is on the level of services to the staff. You can, when you have a problem, you can go and talk to someone who can accompany you. They have an online tool, they have data collection, analysis, and they can exchange and get help from people who had similar experiences or have a higher rate of internationalization. So a very interesting tool for staff services. And that's it. And here is the link to the website. So the general website of ICA, so ICA highereducation.Europe, and then the more specialized pages on the internationalization label. Okay, so I'm ready to ask some of your questions.
Yes, please.
When you gave the example of the Saarland University, you said there is no mobility whatsoever, but it's still internationalized in all aspects. So they have international students. Does that mean that all the international students there are full-time?
Yes.
They're no exchange students, but they're all full-time, right?
Yes, it is I don't remember very well the details, but it's a short program. I think they have master programs, I think. So they are relatively short.
So it's just masters?
Yes, yes. If I remember well. But you can check on the internet site of ICA or of the university for the details. As I said, I don't know so well the good practices. I just checked myself from what I remembered from our meetings. And yeah, but it was I was surprised personally for me, and it came out this morning as one of the main indicators was the level of student mobility. And one of our best practices was without student mobility, which is interesting in this certificate, I think, because it leaves room to innovation or particular study cases. It's not everyone is identical.
Okay, thank you.
More questions? I would like to ask. As you remember in the presentation, when Melissa presented the results of the questionnaire, we applied for different indicators, internationalization, we saw that there are at the end some indicators which are not very present, chosen by, and most of them were related to the academic activity.
Yeah.
Especially those information which is related to the number of conferences teachers attended during the course and so on. How do you reach this kind of information, the information provided by the academics?
But it's different in this project because we do not impose anything. For example, as applicants may be institutes of applied science which have low level of research, they're not so research focused, they will not push forward the research part. Other high-level research universities will focus a lot on the research and give those indicators. There are some indicators, I think in the auto-evaluation report you should supply some indicators we ask for systematically, but otherwise we don't ask for indicators. It's your strategy. What did you write in your strategy and what are the indicators you have put into place to show that the strategy is implemented? And it is exactly the example of Saarland is very good because one of the obvious indicators is student mobility and they do not show this indicator because it's of no interest to them. And yet they are good at internationalization. So this is a much more open, the standards are very open and it's up to the institution to describe its strategy and how it implements this strategy.
So each university
yeah.
has the possibility to choose its own indicators.
Yeah.
It's a very
Yes.
personalized approach.
It's really, it starts from the internationalization goal. What is your goal? So many items. What are the objectives that show that you can follow the implementation and the enhancement? And those are the indicators you choose, which go with your goals. And then, obviously, it's often the main indicators you found are often there because they are obvious. Student staff mobility, yes.
Other questions or comments, or maybe some similar experiences in your own universities?
And I didn't so much stress it, but we had a lot of discussion at the beginning between international and intercultural when we speak of learning outcomes, because it's not really the same. But that was an interesting discussion also. But we included both. And intercultural can be in the same country without having different nationalities, different backgrounds. Yeah.
Any good practice maybe in your own universities?
I thought when I compared the standards and criteria with my own engineering school, I find it's really complete because we did, as I said at the beginning, we did have a strategy, but we did not go as, for example, if I would have applied, maybe I would have applied for an engineering program at program level, but never at institutional level, because we have other short training programs, and we didn't really care if it was internationalized. So it is difficult to have it all through, at all levels of the institution, with all stakeholders, everyone supporting and believing in it and participating in the internationalization. I think it's a really big job. I don't think many institutions are there. There was a French university that got the label, that was a pilot for the institutional level, and they had a very nice program. It's speaking of location, they are in Reims. Well, there's a champagne producing region, but apart from that, they are close to Paris. Too close to be really attractive, as it's a small city, and they have had this problem of attracting international students and professors, and they have this, their good practice was also, they have set a whole program of welcoming and of integrating international students and staff with the city of Reims. So when you arrive in the city of Reims, instead of the tourist office in the city center, you have also the welcoming office of the university run by the city to help you for everything, for paperwork, for accommodation. And the people in the university were very proud of this, and the people in the city were very proud of this. So everyone knew about it and was proud about it. So that is something, it was really permeating the whole institution and city. So that was a nice example also of good practice.
If there are no more questions, thank you very much, Mary Jo.
There was one.
I have decided lately because you are talking mostly about engineering. I am not in that area, but I'm working on a joint program in health nowadays. It is in diabetes nursing, and we are preparing a joint master program in diabetes nursing. Accreditation is our very important subject nowadays when we prepare the program, but it is quite difficult actually. There are other barriers in the background. For example, we work as a five universities from 5 different countries, but education system is different also. This is the main major issue to deal with and to make equality between the systems. Also, UK has its own system, and maybe two questions to you if you have time. One is if you have any experience about accreditation of a program in a health subject in medicine or nursing, and if you give some clues from your experience you have. And other question about UK perspective. How is the accreditation difficulties when UK university is a partner, because they don't belong to Bologna process? This is another barrier for accreditation. Could you give some ideas?
Yeah, so that is a bit a part of the topic, because I was speaking of the internationalization label, which applies to any type of institution or programs. It just happens that I come from an accreditation agency in engineering, so I'm not a specialist of other fields, but in ICA, for example, there are some other agencies that deal with this type of programs. And yes, normally in each country, either it is one agency or several agencies that are specialized, or there is an agency that is global for any type of programs. Then things are changing. For example, the Dutch-Flemish agency, NVAO, they are in a pilot phase. They stopped doing program accreditation. They want now, and which is conform with the Bologna process and the European standards and guidelines, they say the institutions must have internal quality assurance system. And the agency just checks if the internal quality assurance system is okay. And they don't look at each program anymore. It's also more efficient for an agency. Sometimes they might look at one program if there is a problem identified, or new programs maybe. But so there's a shift now in Europe towards global institutional accreditation and no longer program accreditation. And then the problems you pointed out is typical for joint or double degrees in all fields in Europe. Because you have the national regulations, which are still different. But on the other hand, the Bologna process was a bit based on the Anglo-Saxon system, the bachelor, master, PhD. At least we have the same level of degrees, even if we don't put the same things in each degree, but still a bachelor and a master. So if your program is at master level, that's already a nice step to have a common agreement on a common degree that is awarded. And then, the national regulations, you cannot, there is, for example, in France, there's this absurd regulation that we are working on it. If you have a joint degree, a French degree must be on a paper that says République Française. So you have a joint Turkish-French degree, and your Turkish university must have on the degree a paper from the government of France. And universities, it at least do half the page, and the other half of the page is for the partner country. No. French degree must be on the paper, French Republic. I mean, there are some absurdities in national regulations that are being overcome by and by. And the more there are joint degrees or double degrees, the more we will have the pressure to change regulations. But that's then, it's hands-on between the partners to negotiate.